Hello, folks. Welcome to Inclusive Collective, where we share stories and learnings of inclusive people, organizations, and innovation. I'm your co-host, Nadia Rob. I'm an organizational development and belonging strategist, and I'm joined by Rob Hadley, a people and culture strategist specializing in DEI and people analytics. Hey, Rob, what's good this week?
Hello, Nadia. How are you? What's
Doing
happening?
good. I'm doing good. You know, it's our last episode before
Is
summer
it
break,
forever?
officially.
Is this
Not
it?
forever, just
Oh,
summer
okay. We're
break.
coming back.
They signed us up for another season. Can you
I would
believe
like
that?
to. I would like to clarify. It's not our last episode. It's the last one that we're doing in our regular format. There's a lot of bonus
Yes.
content that will be right that people
All
can
summer.
tune into all summer. So there's a lot of great stuff
Yes,
coming.
absolutely. You're right. And actually, speaking of summer, I'm curious, what are your summer plans? Are you doing anything fun?
Yeah. I mean, we're going to Brazil
Ooh,
again. So I think I went for regular listeners. I think that this is my plan for the foreseeable future to try to go to Brazil in July. I live
yeah.
in Utah, where it's absolutely horrifically hot in July and dry, and so I go down to Brazil where it is perfect. It's about 75 degrees and
Oh,
sunny.
is it? I don't know
Everyone's
why I thought it
walking
would be
around in
even more
sweaters because it's
hot.
their winter. They're
That
absolutely
is right.
freezing and I'm feeling great about everything because I have beat the heat. So that's my plan.
I
We'll be
love
back at the
that.
end of July.
That's awesome. I'm gonna try to sneak in a trip with you to Brazil maybe next year. I'm just gonna be like, oh yeah, I'm totally coming down. Just
everyone's
invite
everyone's
myself.
invited. Everyone's in all of
Oh,
our
okay.
listeners, right?
Yeah,
Like we
I'm
we
sure.
can do a
I don't
some
know.
sort of
You
a
gotta run that by
contest.
Juliana first.
Let's do a contest where the prize is hanging out with me and my in-laws in Brazil. How about
Let's
that?
see how many people apply for that contest.
They're very fun. They're very fun. I have to admit.
That's
Fun is
amazing.
not their problem. That's not the issue with these folks. How about you, Nadia?
Very
What are you looking
good.
forward to?
I'm gonna be like just like last summer, go back and forth to DC for school, but also to visit some friends. My friends are having a baby in August, or July/August. So looking forward to meeting the baby. Hoping to go to California to visit my best friend. And I'm really gonna try to commit to like a lot of hiking here locally in the state in Massachusetts, just because like I do some state parks, but I only really focus on the ones more north of the city. So I'm gonna try to get to like the western side of Massachusetts and see what the hiking looks like out there.
Nice, nice. You need to get outside. You've been working really hard. You need to reward yourself with some time,
Oh,
right?
I know it, Rob. It's like the school continues, but gotta experience joy
For sure.
to
Yes.
refuel. So I appreciate that reminder.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, it's going to be an amazing summer. So I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Very good. Well, there were a couple news stories. Shall we get to the deets here?
Yeah. What do you got for me?
All right. Well, Starbucks, one of our favorite
I'm
companies that
sorry.
we
Yeah.
do tend to talk about a lot. So I'm sure you recall. So back in 2018, there were two Black customers, men, who went into a Starbucks in Philly and asked to use the bathroom. And subsequently, they were asked to leave because they hadn't ordered drinks yet. At least
Mm-hmm.
that's what
Yep.
was claimed. They wouldn't leave because they didn't feel like they did anything wrong. They were also waiting for another colleague so they could start their meeting. But before they decided to order drinks, they were trying to use the bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, cops came, they were arrested. So you do recall the story, right?
Of course.
Um, well, so a crazy story here. Jurors in New Jersey awarded $25.6 million to a former Starbucks regional manager who alleged that she and other white employees were unfairly punished after this incident.
Mm-hmm.
So the jury found that race was a determining factor in that regional manager's firing, and in violation of federal and state anti-discrimination, she was ordered to put a white manager who wasn't involved on administrative leave for reasons that she knew were false. She said she was fired less than a month later after objecting to the manager being placed on leave. The lawsuit claimed that Starbucks was taking steps to punish white employees who worked in the area in an effort to convince the community that it had properly responded to that incident. I actually need you to put on your lawyer hat here. I know you like to kind of you like to, try to figure these things out. Any kind of initial thoughts to
I
this?
have no problem putting on my lawyer hat.
I know.
I have a lot of opinions about all legal cases, right? So
Yes.
it's actually hard to put on the lawyer hat here. I read the article in the New York Times. I don't know exactly what happened, right? It was
Mm,
very opaque in the way that they described some of the behaviors of the company and the employees. So I do know that, bad behavior in general tends to cost companies in many ways, right? So in the initial incident, it cost Starbucks, right? So, it was obviously something that happened within a particular store. The
mhm.
decisions that they made at that time were wrong. It cost them in terms of settlements. It cost them in terms of donations to the local community. They had to
Yeah.
close about 8,000 stores in order to deliver bias training, or I know
Because
exactly
we
what
know
they did.
that's gonna move the
Yeah,
needle.
maybe that was the problem.
Right.
So we don't know the details, but we should assume that there's enough evidence to say the jury felt there was discrimination and it was
Sure.
based on race in this
Yeah.
particular case. And there was a punishment that was handed down to this woman that was unwarranted, right? So jury found that. So I guess we have to go on that. I would
Sure.
say, but this is really in keeping with everything that we talk about, right? So you can't make decisions of any kind based on race. You can't say that I'm hiring someone because they're black or because they're white. You can say that given the demographic makeup of my organization or my customers or my community, that I need to improve representation of certain groups over a period of time, and therefore I will consider race as one of many factors in making my decision. That's the appropriate
Mhm.
way to think about it. So
Sure.
that if you think about it that way, you're not reverse discriminating. If this went down as what we saw in the New York Times reporting, this was very much we're going to take out this person because of their race, which
Mhm.
is probably the wrong thing to do, and it ultimately is costly to Starbucks. But I really do think that we should be a little bit cautious here because this was a jury award. It could be reduced significantly. It could be
Mhm.
I don't know if Starbucks is looking to appeal, but it could be potentially a bad decision as well. So we just have to wait and learn a little bit more about the case.
Yeah, sure. And I appreciate those thoughts. Rob Hadley, Esquire. What is it?
Yeah,
ESQ,
yeah,
Esquire.
like
um,
Perry Mason
yeah.
of sorts. Yeah.
Perry Mason. That's great. Just a reminder also to our listeners that these two black men settled with Starbucks back in 2018 for a symbolic $1 each and a
Mm.
promise from city officials to set up a program for young entrepreneurs because they themselves were entrepreneurs. They also got an apology for the arrest from the police department. The reason I bring this up is because this is messy, and you alluded to that. It's complex. And I also just want to make sure that, these two black men, anyone else involved, or just like listening to the story aren't triggered or having trauma because of this event. I think that when reflecting on a case like this, part of what gets me really irritated is that we're like still not getting to the root of the problem. Like, we need to ask ourselves why. And I really hope Starbucks asks themselves why she called the police, right? Like, was it part of their standard process? Like, does she like I'm speaking of the people that maybe not, it wasn't just the regional manager, of course she wasn't there, but it was people within the Starbucks um location that had decided to call the police. So was that part of like a standard process? Like, there's people that are using the bathrooms they're not supposed to be if they don't order something. That's the standard practice in play. Does she call the question here is like, are you calling the police on white people who are also kind of lingering or not ordering? And so like I think this is also just like goes back to the mindsets of unconscious bias. And it was great first step of Starbucks closing down locations to try to do the unconscious bias training that you were talking about. But again, like what else are you doing to help mitigate bias? Because training is not enough, right? It goes back to like what we have always talked about. Let's get to the root of the problem, which is that people are racist, not intentionally most times, but like what the heck? We have to figure out why certain things happen and how to kind of rectify that. So, anyways, I think Starbucks is well, I'm not a lawyer, but I do think that Starbucks has accountability in this, in helping kind of inform what standard practices are and policies of people who might be lingering in their stores that are not ordering drinks. And like at the same time, it's like people have to use the bathroom. What if a person who was houseless needed to use the bathroom and walk into a store? It's like, give me a break here, people. But anyways, now I'm ranting.
Yeah, and you're speaking to the original incident. as well, right? You're definitely focused on the original incident, and I think that what this separate suit shows is that even post all the things that they did to rectify or serve in some ways to mitigate what had happened in that original incident, there were broader cultural issues within that particular district in
Right.
Starbucks
In that
where there was this
community.
culture of retaliation, and there's a ton of
Mhm.
negative behavior that happened after this, right? And I would assume that probably was happening before this as well. Like they probably had a negative culture within that particular district office that would allow that after something like this happened, that there could be retaliation against folks on the basis of race, and that it could be documented and it could be very easily proved within the context of a jury trial system, right? So
Right.
like
Right.
so it is. So it's just, it seems like it's a bad culture overall. And usually, when you find a lack of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that's certainly what you found after the Starbucks case, the initial incident. Usually, find a broader cultural issue of
Yeah.
lack of
Or
trust. Uh,
community issue. Yeah, for sure.
Totally,
Yeah.
totally, right. And so, like, it nests inside broader cultural issues. And again, like, we got to figure out what happened with this particular second incident. But there's no doubt that some of the things that you're laying out about the first incident are very true.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay.
All
What do
right.
you
So
got for me?
next story, Nadia. So
Mhm.
just be very short because this is a positive thing, a victory here. This past week, the Republican Supreme Court, led by my old drinking buddy Brett Kavanaugh, as you know, they actually upheld a 1978 law that was put in place to keep Native American adoptees with their tribes, the Indian Child Welfare Act. This was a major victory for the tribal nations, as the
Mm.
lawsuit was initiated by conservative activists to chip away at principles that allow the tribes to govern themselves. And you remember we talked about this previously on an episode earlier this season. Premise of the law is that tribes are political entities and therefore have the right to govern their land, water use, and businesses, such as gaming or gambling. If the Supreme Court had changed that, then they would lose their rights to do so. In this case, was supported and funded by groups that have no interest in setting up Native children with very nice families. That was not necessarily the
Mm.
point of
Mhm.
funding this particular lawsuit. The idea was that if this case was successful, everything from welfare support to the nations to real estate development and gaming projects could be opened up to people outside of the nations, and that's where the funding and some of the support for this particular case was coming from. So this is a
Mhm.
very good thing, and I think that most of the sovereign tribal nations are very excited about this ruling.
That's awesome. Really great news there. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. All right, let's take a short break, Nadia, and we'll be
Yeah.
back. We made some predictions at the beginning of the year. We're going to come back and see how we did so far. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Inclusive Collective, Nadia.
Yes,
So
Ricardo.
we're at our kind of mid-season break here, or we're going into a new season in the
Yep.
fall. So wrapping up the end of this season, just wanted to remind you that we did some predictions and talked about some certain trends at the beginning of this year. And so I thought it'd be fun to go back and just kind of see how we're doing mid-year and
Mhm.
take stock at some of the things that we had identified as trends we were watching or predictions that we were making. And we both did three. I think the way that I want to take a look at this is, let's go through your three predictions first. We'll kind of grade you. We'll give you a midterm grade. So
Okay.
so give us your prediction, and then give yourself it's kind of like that interim check-in,
Yeah.
or that you do either as a student or as a professional, where you say, "Hey, I think I'm doing pretty well here. I think I'm,
Yeah.
I could get better here."
It's
Uh,
obviously evidence-based though, right? Through
this is
observation.
very, very, yeah, this is very, very subjective. It's really what
Yeah.
you think. And then I can kind of say, well, we can bounce it off each other, how we think we would grade ourselves on our predictions. So you want to go
I
ahead and
love
get
that.
started with give us your three things and what you're thinking. We'll kind of reflect after each one.
Sure. Okay. So the first one was companies will start to evaluate employee resource group ERG effectiveness.
Okay.
So I had made this prediction that resource stakeholders and leaders were going to start to assess the resources budget, time allocation, sponsors, around kind of the dedication to the employee resource groups within organizations, and also start to kind of ask these groups, what not only the effectiveness around business objectives, but like, are we solving problems that we had seen in terms of retention or recruitment or development problems
Hmm.
within the organization? So, as I reflect on this, I think I've observed people are definitely still have the intention and desire to want to create employee resource groups or enhance what they currently have. And I do think there's like this intentional approach on how to do it, but I still see a struggle with measuring the
Hmm.
effectiveness or the efficacy of employee resource groups. And if you recall, we had Dr. Beaver on, a professor at the business school at Suffolk University, who's done a lot of research around affinity groups, employee resource groups, and so forth. And I do think it would be a great opportunity to consider having him come back on to talk about this in particular,
Right.
about what he's observing. But yeah, I've kind of just observed that we're creating ERG groups and we're putting some purpose around it, but we're not really measuring the effectiveness of like, are they actually solving what we had intended them to solve for? Does that make sense?
That makes sense. What grade would you give yourself, Nadia?
I think I gave it a B, and I don't know if that's too generous or not generous. I don't a C to me is failing. I think that's probably something
Oh, you're a great
from my
inflation
trauma.
person.
Yeah, well, because I think of like C in the family of the South Asian household is like that's failing. So, like, so
We have
not
different grading scales. Yeah.
yeah, like, then we didn't standardize this, at all, but, I definitely gave it a B on the border of a C because I don't think that the conversations around effectiveness are happening and measuring.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I
would you
I I
grade
I to
differently?
totally agree. I see the same things. I think that ERGs are there's starting people are starting to look at their effectiveness and start to measure them a little bit better, and they're dipping the toe in the water of thinking, "Hey, how can we make this more effective or make this more purposeful in the way that
Sure.
we're getting some of the benefits out of ERGs?" And so I think that you're probably a little early. So I'd say almost like an incomplete, like it's a soft B
Yeah, it's
minus, but you could
incomplete.
definitely end up with an A by the end of
Yeah.
the year. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, sure. Well, that's why it's mid-year.
Yeah, it's mid-year. What's next?
Okay. The second one was one-off. I made a bold statement. One-off trainings are going to die and strategy becomes the norm. So I
Mm,
definitely am observing this in conversations with leaders and particularly HR professionals that don't have a DEI designated person. I think I was spot on with my prediction, right? Like,
mm,
more intentional. I think that folks are more intentional with how they want to accomplish DEI. I think there's conversations around a thoughtful approach, a roadmap that's being developed. Um, I do think they are having conversations on how to hold the organization accountable,
mhm,
but I do think that they're still struggling, right? Like, I don't see like behavioral shifts or competency shifts. So I'm gonna give this a B plus right now because
mm,
maybe because I'm hopeful. I do think that also the economy or just the recession. I do think people were kind of questioning like should we even have trainings because they are very expensive
mhm,
and maybe they aren't seeing the needle move. So maybe for purposes other than it actually being effective,
mhm.
that it's too costly, that's why it's starting to die. I hope that people are thinking, "What's the strategy?" Knowing that training is not going to solve all of, behavioral shift and mindset shift.
I feel like
What are
you're
your
too hard
thoughts?
on I feel like you're too hard on yourself here. I think it's
Oh.
I think it's at least an A minus and maybe even a
Oh,
solid A because I think that
really?
I've seen
Okay.
and you've seen it generally stated in the media that people are starting to lose their patience with training only approaches
Yeah.
for DEI. And for all the
That
reasons that you
is true,
mentioned.
but do you see the strategy becoming the norm?
Well, I do. I think that we're in this phase where people have lost their patience, and
Yes.
that's where they're starting to search for alternative approaches. And if there's going to be training, it's going to be about building the capabilities internal to the organization so that they can drive change in terms of building out strategy or using data or whatever it takes
Mhm.
in order to drive that within an organization, right? So people do not want to. send their first of all, they've all exhausted the training option, right? And they're
Yeah.
starting to come back and say, well, did we get something out of the training that we thought we made a big investment? Did we get anything out of it? Well, oftentimes the answer is no. And so I think everyone's been sent back to the drawing board, certainly in HR departments, to say, okay, what's the next level? What's DEI 2.0 or 3.0
Sure.
or whatever? Like, what's the next level? And so I think you're spot on. I think that I think it's going to be an A+ by the end of the year.
Oh, wow. Okay. Can't wait to come back to this in December.
Yeah.
Okay. And my third one was measurement will start to align to key performance indicators and performance evaluations. I'm not convinced that this is happening. I don't see behavioral frameworks. I have had a few clients ask what my thoughts are on them,
Hmm.
and which is great, but not everyone is thinking in that manner. I think accountability is still a huge component of how do we actually observe and check and adjust in terms of providing feedback and having coaching sessions around DE and I behaviors. I do, I'd hope that measurement would be a big part of the conversation. Um, so I'm just not seeing it. So I'm going to give this a B minus.
Okay.
I don't right now. I think that there's room for improvement. And maybe am I being too hard? Am I grading hard here? I
I
been
feel
in
like you're
academia
being
too
now
long?
you're yeah. I thought you were gonna have a lot of grade inflation in your grades, but now I'm just worried
Is
about
there a
you.
sliding scale?
I want to make sure you feel good about this mid-year review here.
Oh my god.
So again, I think, I'm actually maybe I'm a little bit biased, recency bias, right? I am working with an organization. I have a client that is digging into some of their behavior competency models aligned with performance management.
Yep.
And we also fielded a call about, with a potential client about doing some of
Yes.
this work as well. And so I'm seeing a little bit of pickup here in some of the interest around performance management and behavioral frameworks. And so
Yeah.
perhaps it's going to be just like your last prediction, where by the end of the year you're going to be gaining a lot of steam here.
Yeah, I hope so. I feel like I sound really negative right now. I do have hope. I also just want to say that there's a big difference. There are a lot of organizations that already have
Right.
behavioral competency frameworks that still struggle with how to align that to performance evaluations.
Right.
Like we've seen, right? Organizations that have been doing this for 10, 15 years still struggle with this. This is not something that we can do overnight. Because again, it's part of the management of people, right? Like people are complex. Anyways, I do have hope. I think that we can absolutely well, let's see what happens in December.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe you
We'll
can
come
re-up
back to
that
it.
one for 2024 too.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, you
just
never know.
recycle that. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about mine. I don't think I did as well as you did on my predictions here. So the first one was that companies were going to invest in inflation support for employees. They were going to
I
come
do
up with
remember that.
interesting ways to support their employees through a very high inflationary period. That hasn't necessarily played out, or I guess I've not been in tune with it as much. I think that employers are kind of waiting it out and just trying to see when things are going to get back to normal and letting their employees figure it out in the meantime. So wages
Yeah,
continue to
sure.
go up. They're at about 4.7% year over year as of May 2023, which is a
Okay.
good thing broadly. While price inflation was down to about 4% in May, that's CPI. So we don't know where this is going, and hopefully inflation starts to pull back and wages continue to go up. Those things tend to work together. So I would say that I'm probably going to be wrong. I give myself a C. I would
Oh,
say
okay.
that I would say that it's probably trending toward a solid D or D minus. In fact, companies are starting to demand that that their employees come back to the office, which we know
Yes.
is a pay cut, right? So as costs for commuting, going out and
Yeah.
getting lunch, childcare, those will continue to be more burdensome as people start to return to the office and are
Yeah.
forced to return to the office. So I think
Sure.
that is actually a pay cut disguised as we want to improve the culture. And therefore, I think that probably I'm going to end up failing this one.
Well, yeah, probably, but let's wait and see what happens in December. I think it'll be interesting to come back to this because the year hasn't finished and I am curious what like that inflation support will look like.
All right.
The
Next
second one.
one. Yeah. So thanks for being so encouraging on my grades. You're
Yeah.
like really giving me the encouragement that I can do better.
Listen,
Increased
there's always room for
I
improvement.
I really screwed this one up. I I said that I went on a bit of a limb. I said that there would be an increased investment in DEI, and
You're dick.
I said that I couldn't imagine there being a sharp pullback in DEI investment, and I
Yeah.
was, I don't know what was wrong with me, but I said that. I don't think that I saw DEI investment as becoming this political
Ah,
football, and where in half of the states, DEI has been equated with, uh,
critical race
I don't even
theory.
well, I guess if I was had a little bit more forethought, I could have seen that coming, but just being so controversial, again, we went over it many times. And so I think that at least in many states, there are significant factions looking to get rid of DEI investment altogether or to make it very hard to invest in diversity, equity, inclusion. And so I think that
Mhm.
I gave myself a C minus. I think it might have been a D minus.
I think that might be a
I
D.
am seeing I am
Sorry.
saying, but within corporations, there was definitely a pullback. I thought at the beginning of the year, people tried to sort out what they were going to, what the economy was going to look like, and I am starting to see a little bit of a ramp up in interest in, again, like you said, what kind of approaches will deliver us results now versus training only
Mhm.
approaches. And so I do think that there could be an increase of spending if things continue to be positive on the economic front, positive from a corporate standpoint. So, yeah, so I think that maybe I'll dig myself out of this hole by the end of the year. What do you think?
I think you could, and the reason why is because companies need people,
Hmm.
and people, I always say people are complex, and employee engagement and other kind of variables or factors are all about DE&I. Like, we can call it whatever we want, but at the end of the day, employee experience, customer experience, those are all things related to DE&I. Call it
Mm,
what you want.
yeah.
So at the end of the day, if your employees, if you're finding that you have a high turnover rate of employees who are leaving the company to go to a competitor, then you got to figure out what in your retention process is wrong. If you don't have people applying to the jobs that you have posted and you are having a recruitment problem, you have to figure out why people don't want to come work at your company.
Mm.
This is all DE&I. So call it whatever the heck you want to call it. But at the end of the day, you're not going to have a company if you don't have people.
Ah,
How
Nadia,
brilliant was that?
hold that thought. Hold that
Sorry.
thought for my next prediction, which
Okay.
is that AI
Oh.
would be everywhere in 2023. That all we
Yeah.
would be talking about would be AI. And you say that
Yeah.
we need people to have a company. Maybe we don't. Maybe that's just
Maybe
where
we
this is all
don't.
headed.
You're right.
And so
Touche.
maybe, yeah. So again, so I'm gonna give myself an A plus on this. It's almost been too much. And I think that actually
Mhm.
I think that there's some room to kind of pull back and are thinking about AI, right? We've been talking a lot about it, but the actual applications and the use cases aren't necessarily there yet. But in every industry, function, domain, generative AI is where all the thinking, all the funding is going. We talked at that time, I had mentioned anecdotal evidence that managers in certain companies were already using AI to write employee reviews.
Employer,
And then
yes.
very recently, Textio I saw came out with a product that basically you put some bullet points in for a review, and then the AI writes it for you in a way that is gender supportive and neutral and is somewhat DEI based. So this is a layup for me. I get an A plus, and and
Yeah.
hopefully we corporations and organizations still need people.
True. And what I'll also say is, first of all, I don't want to forget the fact that you referenced Bill and Ted's bogus journey while you were discussing
That's
the
right.
battle of the robots.
That's
I didn't forget that.
Battle of the Robots.
And also, yeah, like at the end of the day, I'm all for like shortcuts that are not going to lose any sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Effectiveness
Hmm.
or um y- reliability, whatever the word. Maybe my word choice is not right now, but
Sure.
what I fear is like we're not actually observing work. We're not
Hmm.
observing the actual behaviors like an employee does or says in meetings or on projects where we can give them the actual correct feedback.
Hmm.
And instead, we're just going to generate things into ChatGPT for them to throw out an annual review that's not based off of observation.
Right.
And
Right.
that's not how you manage people. That's not how you coach people. So, um, but yeah, Battle of the Robots is true.
Battle of the
So
Robots is
I like
on.
that
It's
grade you
on.
gave. It's on.
It's absolutely on. No, I think it's a great point, right? So like if AI can do something, then sure, let it do that thing, right? Like but as HR leaders, DEI professionals, you need to think about what's the purpose of that activity. And if AI is able to be inserted in that process, then we need to really be rethinking the human component of
Yes.
that particular process, right? So there will be
Right.
components of any particular process or people process, which can be done better and more efficiently by artificial intelligence. We just need to really rethink the human interaction around what that AI is doing so that we
Yep.
can make sure that we preserve the purpose of the particular process or activity, right?
Absolutely. Yep. All right. Well, thanks for that, Rob. Folks, we'll be right back with our rants and raves. Hi, folks. Welcome back. It's that time for rants and raves. But Rob, we're doing a double rave today,
Double
right?
rave.
To end on a good note. For
Absolutely.
the
That's
summer.
yeah. What do you got for us? I'll
Let
let
me
you
rave
kick it
here.
off.
So, Rob, do you enjoy country music?
That is a
All right,
complicated question
answer
for
that
me to
lightly here.
answer. Yeah. The answer is both yes and no.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's yes and no.
Yeah. I actually enjoy country music. Some stars I
Okay.
really enjoy. But so country singer Garth Brooks, he's a
Hmm.
very kind of
I've heard.
famous
Yep, heard of him.
person. Okay. He has caused some controversy last week by saying that he'd serve Bud Light at his new bar, Friends in Low Places in Nashville. He
Ah,
told his audience at a concert, I believe, that he wants to encourage inclusive behavior at his bar, and those who do not wish to comply can take their business elsewhere. Of course, this comes after the company Anheuser-Busch, who makes Bud Light, was attacked by conservatists about having an influencer who is transgender promote their beer. Garth Brooks went on to say that, and I'm quoting here, diversity, inclusivity, that's me. It's always been me. I think diversity is the answer to the problems that are here and the answer to the problems that are coming. So I love diversity. End quote. Give it up for Garthy, huh?
yeah, yeah. I will say that I definitely enjoy this aspect of Garth Brooks for sure.
Sure. Sure.
Right. I do question why he's punishing the people that show up at his bar by serving them Bud Light, but I do really appreciate the
Oh,
support. I mean,
okay. So
as
you're not a Bud Light fan.
I mean, I mean, I mean, yeah, it's a complicated question. Now, I don't know what's right and wrong anymore,
Oh
but yeah,
gosh.
definitely like
Don't
the
be Kid
statement
Rock.
and the sentiment is
Yes.
100% spot on. It is
Yeah.
just it's wonderful to see, and I think that we talked about this last week. It's a super majority of Americans that's support for LGBTQ plus, and certainly, and very specifically, trans folks' rights, and therefore it's just the silliness. We need to somehow break away from the silliness of this one-sided culture war that's just manufactured and made up, and it's
Yeah, it's really cool to yeah, he's like a prominent figure in the country music community. And for him to speak up, it just, especially, it's Pride Month. And so, like, just for him to speak up and really stand up to his, like, have his values be expressed and shared. And you know what? It's not all about business for him. Like, it's his
mhm,
values. And I think that's really important for people to hear. So, yeah, I wanted to share that as one of the raves.
super meaningful, right? Like sometimes folks make statements and they're somewhat performative, but
Hmm.
when a major country western star says it, on stage, talks about it in the context of their bar in Nashville, right?
Yeah.
Very conservative state. Obviously, the city is probably not very conservative, but that's a big deal. And so it's
Yeah.
not performative, right? And so like
Yes.
it's really important that we hear these voices. And so thank you, Garth
Yep.
Brooks. Really appreciate that. So Nadia, I don't know if you
Yes.
know, I know you're a big basketball fan. Last
Yeah.
week, as you know, the
Yeah.
Denver Nuggets, the Nuggets of Denver,
Sports.
my hometown, my
Yeah.
hometown team, my favorite team. They won the NBA championship, and so
Congrats.
after 47 years of
Oh,
futility,
wow.
right? So
That's
the
a
Nuggets are the
long
best
time.
team in basketball, and they're there because of the talent of the best player in the world, Nikola Jokic of Serbia. And why do I bring this up on the Inclusive Collective podcast, other than to just take a victory lap for myself and just make myself
Yeah.
feel good? But if there was ever a test case for looking beyond our biases, it's Nikola Jokic. He doesn't look like what we think a superstar basketball player should look like. He doesn't jump high. He doesn't run fast. He isn't well defined physically. Some would call him not. Uh, they say he can barely jump over this flat piece of paper, right? So all
Oh,
these
wow.
different things,
Okay.
right?
Yeah,
But
sure.
because the Nuggets were able to see past those things, they drafted him 41st overall. They very importantly invested in him and decided to build a team around him
Mhm.
and his unique gifts. So the things that he does do very well, he does them at a level that other players have never been able to achieve. And so they are now champions because they could look past their own bias and see the star within this particular person who doesn't necessarily fit what all of us are looking for when we try to build a basketball team. So congratulations to me
Congrats.
and uh, I mean to the
Me.
Denver Nuggets and to Nikola
Oh, Rob.
Jokic and
Yeah.
you know many more, hopefully many more championships for me to be raving about in the future.
Very cool. Yes, congratulations to you.
Oh, thank you,
Excited for all
thank you.
the Denver fans. I know this is huge for many of you. 47 years you said? That's a long time.
We were born the same year, the Nuggets
Yeah.
and Rob Hadley. Yeah,
Oh, there you go.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I did want to close out with just wanting to wish everyone a happy Juneteenth. This episode airs on actual June 19th. As a reminder to folks, this is a holiday in the US that commemorates the day when the last enslaved people in the country were informed of their freedom. It is an important day of celebration for all Americans. If you're looking for more resources around it to inform yourself, I personally love going to the Smithsonian. They have obviously a very great in person exhibit, but also online if you have the availability. So, much great information on the National Museum of African American History and Culture. I also love what the ACLU has online. I also just love honoring this holiday with an action. And my goal is really during the year is to continue to encourage people to get out to vote. So even though it's not election season, we still send postcards, make calls, and knocking doors to inform people to register to vote,
Hmm.
informing people of their rights in voting. It's really important to me and my family, and so it's really what I love to do. So I'm hoping to write some postcards on Monday to encourage people to register to vote. Any plans for you?
That's amazing. I really like. So that's great. So just want to take a moment to that's a really great piece of advice, Nadia. I'm somewhat encouraged because this year we're seeing less Juneteenth ice cream type fiascos. I haven't seen any Juneteenth ice cream
Yeah,
issues happening. I think corporations
same.
are wising up a little bit about and
I
starting
hope so.
to reflect and think about what this really means. I did have as you were talking about that, I did think about something from a white person's perspective, and that is that, and we didn't talk about this on Martin Luther King Jr. Day earlier this year, but a lot of white business leaders will, they will quote the I have a dream
Martin Luther
speech
King. Yeah,
in the
right.
context of,
Yeah.
in the context of saying, sometimes they will even quote in the context of saying that we don't need to make investments for DEI. And so my only requirement for people quoting Martin Luther King is that they have to know more than one particular speech that he's given, and they have to know more than one particular line of that
Mm-hmm.
particular speech, right? And so
Sure.
you can get all of the great speeches of Martin Luther King Jr. In an audiobook. It's called A Call to Conscience. And you can listen to many of the greatest speeches end to end, so there's 10, 12 hours. Listen to all of these things before you start to cherry pick the things that you like and put it in the context of whatever point that you're trying to make. And so
Yep.
pick up A Call to Conscience, put it in your car, use it, listen to the speeches on your commute. If you're taking the bus every day, listen to all the things that this particular leader said and wrote, because
Mhm.
it really is starting to get annoying that the only time I hear a white person quote Martin Luther King Jr., it's from one particular speech. So that would be my advice
I
what to
love
do.
that. Thank you for sharing that. I'll also offer, in addition to that, is like, yes, fine, quote MLK Jr. There's so many other Black prominent figures and leaders that we can learn from that have been sometimes erased from our learning or education. And so you have one in my back behind me, Malcolm X. I really admire the work that he did prior to his assassination. And there's definitely other people. So I love that piece of advice, Rob. I appreciate that. We also will be posting some great tools that managers can leverage to honor and celebrate Juneteenth. We posted it last year. We'll post it again on Monday, maybe Sunday, actually. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. Wonderful things. Happy Juneteenth, everybody. Well, Rob, another great season.
Nailed it.
Folks, nailed it. Folks, this is a wrap on season 3. We will be back in the fall for season 4. But like Rob had mentioned earlier in the interim, we will have a lot of fun things that we'll be sharing throughout the summer. So stay tuned, continue to subscribe. Inclusive Collective is a production of Rifelion Media. We'd love to hear from you. So please send us your feedback or your thoughts at inclusivecollective@rifelion.com. You can also find us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and now YouTube. So follow us there. If you like what you heard, please be sure to subscribe, rate us wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to get in touch with us for consulting, check me out at nasconsultants.com and Rob at tacanoconsulting.com. Thank you, Rob. It's always
Thanks
a
so much,
pleasure.
Nadia. Always a
Be
good
well.
time. All right.
Be
Have a great
well.
summer, everyone.